Master the business of speaking with your hosts, Taylor and Austin. You're listening to Technically Speaking.
Welcome to another episode of Technically Speaking. We're your hosts, Taylor and Austin, and in today's episode, we brought back a special guest. Back in season 1, we brought in Jeff Civillico to share his wisdom around building engagement in our audiences. Now, if you haven't listened to that episode, definitely go and do that. Now, Jeff has headlined in Vegas for the better part of 2 decades, and with that experience came mastering the craft of moving and deeply engaging with an audience. Now, we had such a good conversation about what it takes to truly engage an audience that we ran out of time to talk about something near and dear to Jeff's heart. So we decided to bring him back for season 2. That something? Well, philanthropy. Now, Jeff shares with us how rewarding, beneficial, and impactful philanthropy can be for you and your business. Not only that, he shares with us a simple path forward for any of us looking to do more charity, start a nonprofit, or simply give back. As always, stick around until the end for some awesome resources. We hope you enjoy this one, and we'll see you in there. And we are live. Jeff, you decided to come back for round 2.
Couldn't get enough, fellas.
My question was going to be why? Like,
Why?
why?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
I'm back for some philanthropy. That doesn't sound as
Philanthropy.
as hardcore. I'm like, let's talk about giving back.
Yes.
Do the old
I
Conan.
think there needs to be more people out there making that statement proudly. So,
Yeah. Getting fired up.
you're one of what, 2, Taylor? I guess
Yeah,
that
2
we
so far that we
brought
brought
back for a
yeah.
second time too.
Mhm.
So,
One,
boom.
two.
I mean,
Who's the
look at
other?
you. You're in the elite class, Rich Mulholland,
Rich
Okay.
out of South Africa. Very cool
Awesome.
individual.
Wow,
Good
I
episode,
am
listener.
honored, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Oh
It's
man,
a
we're honored
pleasure.
to have you here.
It's because
So-
of all the serious content I bring.
Yeah. We were just going to bring that up.
We have this thing with mugs at Speaker Flow. Like we were just on Sally Z's podcast recently,
Yeah.
and Taylor had the most Minnesotan mug I've
This is
ever
legit
seen.
all I use. Everyone who's seen
There
the
you go.
video
It's
so far,
hilarious.
it's just this buffalo plaid. It has a moose on it, because of course, and
Yeah.
Dude,
it's the same one.
everything in my house is either Philadelphia Eagles or Mike Wazowski. Huge Mike Wazowski fan. Kindergarten, best 3 years of my life. Of my life.
It's a great show.
Oh, it's so good. Put that thing
Yeah.
back where it came from. Also, help me and cut. I go on and on.
Wow, man. I think someday we're gonna have to do one more episode together where it's just you
It's just
dialoguing through the
The Mike
entire.
Wazowski
Yeah, it won't
special.
even be with Jeff Civillico. It'll be with Mike Wazowski, and
Oh,
you can just be
absolutely.
expression it the entire time.
featuring Jeff Civillico.
So I don't know if you've ever been to Disney World. Have you seen the
Uh-oh.
Monsters Inc. experience where Mike
Yeah.
Wazowski like hosts it? From the.
Oh, I haven't
comedy
seen
club
that.
stage?
No.
Oh, I mean, literally the jokes. Kids are dying, and me. I'm in the back, like no! Like it's clearly intended for children, and I'm a grown man, just like doubled over laughing. He just silly. He'll say, like, all right, like great to be here. Everybody's having a great time except for that guy, and then, like a spotlight will just go on this like one person in the audience, and it'll show a camera of just this like random dude. You know what I mean? And I'm just like some dad there, right? And I'm just like, that's brilliant. We have the same sense of humor.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I respect that. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that it's a good thing that you're secure in your adulthood, but you
Oh,
still
yeah.
like your childlike wonder, right? We
That's
don't have
right.
enough
Gotta
of
keep
that
it around.
these days. So
Absolutely. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
hopefully you're inspiring some people out there to go watch Monsters Inc. Go do it, folks.
Yeah, that's right. Not sponsored, but should.
Yes, and go watch Monsters Inc. again.
Yeah.
Sponsored by Speaker Flow.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, Jeff, last time we had you, we ran out of time to talk about something highly important in your business, which is this idea of philanthropy. And so we want to unpack that today and why it's so important to you, where it kind of all stemmed from. So why don't you kick that story off? Like why? Why? Well, what got you started on the whole
It's
thing?
funny because it's always kind of the last thing to come up whenever you do an interview or
It
you
is,
talk
yeah.
with someone, right? And I understand that you don't want to lead with like, well, like let me tell you about how great I am and all the nice things I do, right? It's always like, this is my career, this is who I am, and also this is my give back or this is how I volunteer. And I totally understand that and get that. But in my situation, the philanthropy actually came first. It came before the performing, before the speaking.
Wow, no kidding.
A lot of people don't realize this. The first show I ever did was a charity show. So I owe my performing career, my speaking career, to my charity work because I was a charity performer first. So
Wow.
it was high school. I was 14 years old, and I met with my guidance counselor at the time, and we had a service project to do. And the task was to do something that takes you outside of your comfort zone and write a reflection on it. So you're supposed to talk to your counselor, think, okay, well, what do you like to do? What resonates with you? How would you like to give back? And my friends were volunteering at senior care facilities, right? Or, giving out soup kitchens, right? Helping out, Habitat for Humanity, working with homeless. And it was actually my dad who had the idea. He said, well, you like to do these shows in the kitchen for grandmom and the family after dinner, these magic and juggling kind of variety shows. Why don't you do a show for the special needs school down the street? Now, my dad is a dentist, and he would give free dental care to all the kids and all the workers there as a way. So we had this relationship. Thought, oh, that's really cool. That's kind of fun because I've never actually shown up somewhere outside of my kitchen and said, I am your entertainer, right? I'm here to entertain you. And so I thought that sounds fun and like a challenging, and certainly would take me outside of my comfort zone. And that's what I did. And it sounds a little cheesy, but that show changed my life. Doing that show for that special needs school was the first time I ever showed up and said, I'm here to entertain. And I learned quite a bit. So that's how it all started for me. I kept doing charity shows for that special needs school. And then just like, the for-profit world, everybody talks. So pretty soon I was doing shows at other special needs facilities, and I was doing shows at local hospitals. And then I was doing shows at nursing homes. And in high school, I actually started a juggling club where I taught some of my friends to juggle, and we performed. We did the charity circuit, right? That's all we did. We did like nursing homes and hospitals and all sorts of pro bono events. And that's how I started performing. So for me, it wasn't like something I added on later. It's baked into the fabric of who I am as a performer. And I always tell performers how do you get your gigs? Where do I start? Like, start with charity shows,
Charity,
start
yeah.
with free shows. Yeah. Because they're super grateful. So it's a pretty easy audience, right? You're there to entertain at a children's hospital. It's a lot different than, at a corporate event or something where they're paying you 5 figures. So the pressure isn't there as much, but in a sense, it's even more challenging, which is great for your formation and great for your development. Because if you can go and into a playroom at a children's hospital and make all those kids and parents and staff laugh, win them over, think about what they're going through, all the challenging circumstances, or going door to door. We go to room, hospital bedside visits, show up, and a kid understandably is like in a bad mood, or, they're tired, or maybe they've just, they're stressed out about a surgery, or they've just come from something or treatment. And you can win that room over. Like, one kid in the hospital bed with his mom there and a nurse kind of coming in, like, man, then you're an entertainer. If you can bring that child some happiness and make that child smile, and that's just a great feeling. So I always tell performers, man, there's no excuse. You can't get gigs, you're just starting out. Like, there's a whole lot of people that would love for you to visit and entertain. Nursing homes, special needs facilities, foster homes, orphanages, school, even like Title I schools, all sorts. Like, just get on the phone, get online, and offer to do a show, and they're not going to turn you down. They are so grateful for the support. They're grateful for you reaching out.
Oh man, okay, so this prompted 2 things for me. First of all, like, I find myself inspired by young people that just like really want to change the world. Like, I saw a news article recently of this group of like 2 or 3 or 4 like teenagers really that had a river or a creek that was near their house, and it was just absolutely covered in trash and junk and stuff. And so they made it their mission. They sacrificed, but
Yeah.
as a teenager, right, you
Yeah.
have to give up your time. They gave up their time to go and spend time cleaning that thing up, and it took them months and months, but now it's like this beautiful area. And I've always wondered, like, what happens to those people? Like, do they keep doing that for the rest of their lives? So you've now inspired me that you can, in fact, take those really cool things that happen in the formative years and continue to develop that over time until you have something like win-win, which I'm excited to unpack.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I really think that you kind of fall in love with that feeling
Mhm.
And I mean, this is kind of controversial at times too, right? Because it's like if you're still getting that fulfillment of doing something good, is it still like as beneficial? And I would say yes. Like I don't care that I feel good about myself after I've done a show for a children's hospital. Like who cares, right? Like you did the good work. It was well intentioned. If you feel good about that, that gives you a little like dopamine hit, and you that feeling of like giving back, and it inspires you and spurs you on to do more. Great. So I don't care about that at all. When performers will come to me and say like, oh gosh, that felt so good. Like I want to feel like that again. And then I kind of unpack it because I know I'm like, well, yeah, no wonder why it feels good, because you've just spent the last, you know, 10 years promoting yourself and talking about yourself on social media and
Yeah.
promo videos and look at me and all this stuff. And for the first time probably in a while, you weren't thinking about anybody else, right? You might have thought as you're going, oh, this will be good, or oh, I'm going to post this online. But when you're in that moment and you're like in the zone in a hospital room with a kid entertaining, everything else goes out the window. You don't care at all. And I have performers who will say, yeah, I can do a visit, but I'm really busy today. I can only stop by for like 20 minutes. They're there for like 4 hours, right? Because they realize this is super important, and something happens to them when they're performing. You realize this is more important than anything else I had planned today, is like making this kid's day. And I have performers who'll say, hey, I dropped off some magic tricks for this kid. Any chance I can come back maybe next week and like check in on him and like, see how he's doing? I'm like, absolutely. Right. So it is kind of funny to see the difference of mindset, right? That flip between people who are, again, nothing wrong with it, but naturally focused on promoting themselves as the product. When you flip the script like that and it's not about you, it just opens your mind up to crazy perspective changes, which I think has a real lasting effect on you, especially if you get involved doing it early.
Yeah.
Then something like win-win happens, where you kind of get other people involved, and it just grows and builds organically.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask about that. So, like, when did it segue for you from, just doing pro bono work because it felt
Yeah.
good to like, now I'm going to create a nonprofit? Like, what happened for you where that switch happened?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, as I mentioned, I started off, it was in high school doing these shows. So, all through high school, it was just fun, right? I was doing shows at hospitals and nursing homes. And then I went to college in DC at Georgetown, and same kind of thing. I got involved in like DC Kids, Hoya Kids, DC Reads, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Clubs, a lot of these groups that were affiliated with Georgetown in some way. Like they would have a Boys and Girls Club, chapter, right, of Georgetown Kids. And then they would see me doing a show somewhere, or they would hear about me doing shows at DC Improv or elsewhere. And so I would perform for these charity groups that were kind of affiliated through Georgetown. So I loved doing that. So I kind of kept that going. And then as I turned pro, as professional juggler at the time, after college, I was working on cruise ships, but I was based out of Orlando. I lived right next to Florida Hospital. And so I was working for Disney, doing a lot of work on Disney Cruise Line. And so when I was off, I would go do shows at Florida Hospital. And then I started doing shows at Give Kids the World, which is a group, an amazing organization in Orlando that sponsors like trips for kids with terminal diseases. You're nodding your head, so you're familiar with them. Yeah, awesome organization. So I would do shows for them. So it was all just kind of for fun because I enjoyed it, this and that. When I got to Vegas, that's when, the Red Bull and gasoline kind of made things explode, right? So a couple things happened then, right? So I came to Vegas, and I would naturally I got involved with giving back at UMC Children's Hospital because that was the local nonprofit hospital. But now I had my Vegas show and also social media like Instagram. This is now, so now I'm dating myself, but this is, keep in mind when I started doing this, there wasn't social media.
Yeah.
And so now like Instagram, Facebook, like everything's kind of blowing up, and I had a bigger platform of the Vegas show. And so now when I would do these visits, I would post about them, and performers would say, oh, that's awesome. Like, I didn't know. They would say like, oh, I didn't know something like that existed. I was like, well, I mean, it doesn't. Like, it doesn't exist. You just like just call the hospital, email the hospital and like arrange it. You can do that too, right? Like, but sure, I'll arrange it for you. So I started arranging these shows for my friends and for performers in Vegas. There's so many here, and most of them have their days free, even if they're in the show at night. And so very organically, all of a sudden I realized like I'm kind of serving like a charity agent, right? There's no money being exchanged, but I'm matching time and talent with hospitals that want it, right? So again, everybody talks and things spread. So if I do a show at a hospital, performers say, "Wow, that's cool. I'd like to do that." But then hospitals say, "Oh, hey, so and so was a child life specialist, came over here and said that you got some performers that would come visit. Can you arrange a visit for this day?" And so all of a sudden I realized, all right, I've got like all the hospitals in Vegas and all these performers. And then it moved on from hospitals to senior care facilities and the USO Air Force bases. And it was when a guy named Charles Burrow, who's still on our advisory board, he was the head of PR for the residential shows in Vegas for Cirque du Soleil at the time. And he connected with me. We went for coffee and he said, "Hey, I think you really have something here, like much bigger than you just texting your buddies and calling. Like Vegas needs this. Vegas needs a home for entertainers that can help connect them with all these causes in the community." So with his help and another board member, Matt Malone, who is a friend, a lawyer from Georgetown who lives in Vegas, we formed our 501c3 and we got going. So that was really, I owe it to Charles to really say, "Hey, I think this is like bigger than what you might think." And then, I can turbo through. We've refocused a few times to focus on just children's hospitals exclusively now, direct service to children's hospitals, and we've just multiplied from there. So then other cities started calling, right? In Orlando is next because I came from Orlando. So the Florida hospital contacts I had were like, "Oh, this is great." I knew a ton of performers in Orlando, and now we're up to 15 plus cities.
Wow.
Doing all these shows right up until COVID. We were of course in-person visits, but with COVID, we turned everything virtual. So now we do all of our visits virtually as well. Hopefully we'll be adding back in-person visits in 2022. But the virtual option has really expanded our reach because now we can hit all these smaller market hospitals where performers don't live or they're not traveling through. So now we have programs like at, Burlington, Vermont, UVM, Charleston, South Carolina, Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis, all these smaller market hospitals, as well as performers all over the country. So we'll have, a performer from Columbus, Ohio, zooming in to perform for kids and at Phoenix Children's Hospital. So now it's just like completely blown up.
Wow.
In the best possible way.
Man, that is so cool. And look, I think what I love about this and what I hope some of our listeners are hearing amongst all of the other good things, but like what you just described was an evolution into something that's substantial at this point, right? Like I'm sure there's a lot of logistics to make all this happen, but like if somebody feels called to give back in any way, like you just described a scenario where it does not have to start like this complex thing. Like one of the questions as we were ideating what this episode would look like was like, when is the right time to like get into philanthropy? And I think it's because like philanthropy just as a word has this connotation to like large sums of money being given to people. Like I really think that's the thing that most people associate with it. But it's like it doesn't have to be that. Like you started by just giving little bits of your time trying to like make a difference and improve people's lives. And like there was no structure to it. It didn't need that, right? It doesn't need that necessarily for somebody to get started. And then it can become whatever it needs to become. I love that.
Yeah, man. You are preaching it, brother, because people all the time say to me like, "I want to start a nonprofit." And I'm always like, hold on a second. Like, when it's like, just do what you want to do now. Like starting a nonprofit is like paperwork and this, that, like, what do you actually like to do? It's like, well, okay, after it's like, well, I want to work with, kids who are autistic, right. And help them with like, I want to do like a sports league for kids with autism. I'm like, cool, that exists. It's called Miracle League. It's a national organization, right. That special needs autism. Like, instead of trying to start a nonprofit, you should start volunteering with Miracle League because 2 points that I'm getting at here. One is like, only start a nonprofit after you're in and doing the work,
Yeah.
like for a while, to understand the space, because there's a really good chance what you need to do is not start another nonprofit, but help an existing nonprofit, because there are thousands and thousands of nonprofits in every city. I mean, like literally thousands and thousands. And if you just pick an area like, animals, or like, whatever, there's like thousands of within that subset, right? Of whatever I want to help animals. Great. Like, learn what's going on in the space first, because you really might be duplicating your efforts and diluting volunteer efforts and donor efforts and everything else. So one, I would say you might not necessarily need to start a nonprofit, although that could be intended. What we really need is help. But also two, like, to your point, just start doing whatever it is that you're doing, right? Like, if it turns into a nonprofit, great. But there's nothing holding you back from starting to work on your mission, whatever that is now. People ask me all the time, like, how do you start a nonprofit? I'm like, by just starting to do the work, right? So again, look at win-win. If you were to say, I want to start a nonprofit where I send performers to hospitals all over the country, like, okay, awesome. You know how much I learned by actually doing it myself? Like, I was the guinea pig.
Yep.
I learned, I got the experience, so that now when I talk to other hospitals, I'm like, here's the way this works best. Now, when I talk to performers about getting involved, I can say, here are some tips and tricks, some do's and don'ts, right? Even just basic stuff like, don't ask a kid like how he's feeling and like what happened. And, things that would sound obvious that now are like no-nos. But then if we have these toolkits that we send to the performers as well as the hospitals to show we're legit, we understand where you're coming from, we understand what you're looking for. So when a hospital is checking us out, they see all this social proof from all these hospitals. But more than that, they see, okay, they've got like do's and don'ts. They understand HIPAA violations. They know what insurance requirements are needed. They do background checks on all their performers. Like, all of that would be totally daunting and inundating if you were starting off like, oh, I want to start as a nonprofit, right? Doesn't work like that, right? Get in there, build some relationships, get the experience, and you learn so much more about what's really needed and where and how you can make an impact.
So simple. It's like that crawl, walk, run, like, I mean, it just, you don't just dive in. It doesn't happen. It's just a lot of baby steps to get there. And it obviously makes sense to start by just giving, making it as simple as possible. You're going to feel fulfillment from that almost right away, I would anticipate.
Well, and this is the great, you're talking about full circle moment here. The word philanthropy, you're saying it has this like kind of big connotation, like a little scary, lots of sums of money. It's something that I do like after I'm established, after I've made my mark, and like, now let's build my legacy with some philanthropy. Like, that's not, you know what I mean? Like, putting your name on a building and donating something is like, sure, that's one small piece of philanthropy, but that's why I do love my story, because the giving came first, which is like how I believe it should be with everybody. I feel like it should be part of who you are, and a lot of that's how I was raised. Like, it's just kind of part of the deal. Like, when you think about your life, you think about your health, relationships, education, like giving back, volunteering. That was always one of those big buckets about whether or not like I was living a good and fulfilling life. And sure, some of that is upbringing and family and schooling. But as I think about my formation, I'm like, yeah, that was always kind of a piece that if it wasn't there, I would think my life isn't as rich and fulfilling as it could be. And starting early with whatever you can do is just awesome. And, you mentioned like the kids cleaning up the river. I see some of that now on social media, and it's awesome. It's just great. You see, like, hey, there's a kid who, he's really good with tech. And so his dad has him volunteer at the local senior care facility and like help them with tech, help them do like FaceTimes with their grandkids, or help them like with iPhoto and organize their photos and things, right? And the kid's like 13 or something. It's cool. It's like, hey, he's a tech whiz. His dad wants him to kind of learn about giving back, and then he started playing like games with the seniors, because he became known. So he started like hosting kind of like bingo and fun games and stuff. And it's just so awesome when you see it start early like that.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
organic. It's like the definition of something that happens organically. It's
Mhm.
what better way to do it? And honestly, like business owners are squirrel chasers. Like to kind of just go back to your point of don't start the nonprofit right away. Maybe you have an idea of what you want to do, but it's not guaranteed that that's the thing you really find enjoyment in. Like, give yourself permission to explore and figure out all of the ways you can be most impactful in the ways you're giving back. That's I think, part of the piece of the puzzle here.
Well,
Yeah.
and there's so many creative ways, like you were just
Yeah, it's
outlining,
true.
like that kid that went to the old the nursing homes or whatever, right? And
Yep.
they help them better use technology. Like that's super creative. There's probably not a lot of people that could do that because he had the
Exactly.
right balance,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Of
right.
tech
But when you
skills
think
and
about like real life, what people need, what a great way to volunteer and to donate
Mhm.
your time.
He's
Yeah.
making the most of what he knows too. Like what I love about that story is like it's not like he. I mean, I'm just making some hasty generalizations here, but what I'm hearing from the story really is that like he just took what he was already good at and applied it to a way that he could give back. You didn't have to kind of go out of your
Exactly.
own box. You can search within to find that thing that you're just inherently good at that you can provide value in.
Yep. Yeah, and I do think there's kind of a rep, it's like, oh, if I speak for free, you're like an amateur, or this or that.
I want to touch on that free versus philanthropy label.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like the people at the top always give back and always, because they're not threatened by what other people think. And I've seen that with Win-Win as well. There's some entertainers who are like, well, I don't want to do like Children's Hospital because like I don't want people to think I'm a kids performer. It's like, okay, but like, there's also
Not the same.
yeah, I'm like, sure, but like that's lame. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, I don't think anyone is gonna be potentially hiring you for some, large contract and then see, oh, he also like donates time to children's hospitals. So like pass. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like in what world are you living in? But I whatever that kind of line of thinking is out there, and I think it just comes down to being good at what you do. Like when you're really good at what you do, nobody thinks that. They think like, oh man, this girl's awesome because they do this on the side. And I think it is it is a really it's everywhere. The idea of that you can perform or speak for free. There's a difference between like a paying company that is not paying you to speak and you speaking for like a children's hospital organization, right? Like that's a little different. When you're doing a pro bono type of organization, charity organization, that's very different than IBM, who's like, well, we don't have much of a budget for you. Would you do it for free? Kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, we got to check our intentions a little bit too, I think, right? Because it's easy to get ego tied up in this. And again, I'm making some assumptions here. I could totally be mischaracterizing this person that you just referenced here, right? Or I don't want to become known as the person that speaks for children or whatever. But like, are you doing the work because you want to see an impact and a change made?
Or are you doing
the work so you can promote it and you can look like somebody who's philanthropic? And I'm to your point earlier, right? Like there's nothing wrong with promoting the good things that you do. And it's okay. I think it's easy to see philanthropy as something where we have to be selfless about it, where there's no intentions of us benefiting from it. And to your point earlier, like you feel good after you do that, and that's perfectly okay. So I'm not saying that the ego has to be entirely removed from the situation, but I think if you're asking yourself like, oh, well, I don't want to become known as the person that just speaks for free or whatever, like, well, why are you really doing it? Why even promote it then? Like maybe just don't tell anybody about it. Just go do it because you're good at it. And then don't make a bunch of noise around it. And then nobody will ever even know. And you've still been able to make the impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and another one that drives me crazy with entertainers, especially, is, say, hey, here's the schedule of free charity shows that we do, free events. Would love to have you. And keep in mind, Win-Win, we always know paid bookings come first. And that's why we exist, is to protect you from that. So when you commit to us to do a free event, we are not telling the hospital until the morning of you find out like who's coming. And that means if you get a paid booking, take it, right? We're not telling you to turn down work, right? But that's the benefit of working through us, so that if you do have a booking, we can fire off to our database in Orlando or Minneapolis or whatever and saying, hey, we have a last minute, looking for a fill-in for this Saturday or this Thursday at the hospital, right? So of course I'm not asking you to turn down paid work, right? That's a big part of why Win-Win is there, is to protect the performers from that. And the hospitals know, we don't know who it's going to be, but we're going to get a flyer the morning of, and every week, Monday at 11 a.m., like there's an awesome show brought to us by Win-Win. So it works. But this happens all the time where someone says, man, I can't do any more. I can't do free shows. Like I'm dying, it hasn't been a good year and this, that. I'm like, well, that's totally backwards thinking. Like,
Yeah, right.
Scarcity kind of mindset. And I've tried to talk people out of that. And I realize you can't really. If people say like, oh man, like it hasn't been good or this or that. I'm like, well, if anything, this will show you performing, being active. It's like giving you some kind of buzz that you can go with. So I see performers all the time. They'll put our shows on their calendar. I think that's great. I'm doing a show for this children's hospital. I'm doing a Win-Win Live, a virtual show, and I love that because they really bake us into their performing calendar in a way, again, that protects them. If they have to, bail on us, it's not a problem. We have the network to be able to cover that. But again, I just think it's like a total misunderstanding. I feel like, I'm like, it's such a missed opportunity when I see some of these performers who don't want to do the charity show, the free shows, because they're like, afraid of it, like how it's going to look. I'm like, I think you're backwards there.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably gonna look good, actually.
Yeah, really,
exactly.
it's gonna benefit. And speaking of, like, let's take a minute because I think, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. This will certainly help your business. Like, there's no doubt about it. And there's nothing that we should feel bad for about that. Like, you're creating impact. Good promotes good. That's just how the world works. It's a beautiful thing. So, like, that being said, like, and we talked about like buzz. It creates buzz for you, which is nice. That's one business benefit. But from your experience, what have you found to be the benefits of also running a nonprofit on the, in addition to your for-profit business?
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, people want to do business with people they like. People they trust.
Yeah.
And I think it tells a story of a little more about you than the guy who shows up and does the magic show, or, the guy who shows up and speaks on customer service. It's like you kind of get to pull the curtain back on that person and see a different side of them. And I think that exposure, that vulnerability, there's a certain authenticity and rawness that comes when you see someone in those situations. And I think it naturally just makes you kind of a more attractive option. I've been backstage at events where I'll be just kind of talking to somebody before, somebody, high exec in the company, and they'll say, oh yeah, it was down to you and this other guy, but we started poking around and we saw the charity work you do, and we thought, hey, this guy really reflects our values, or we're a family owned business, and the Ridley family is really interested and has always put a high priority on giving back, and so that kind of pushed us over the top. And I'm like, oh, cool, like that's nice. Like I wouldn't even think that. But people poke around, right? And social media, people kind of know.
Buzz.
I think especially with social media, they want to know that you're the same type of person off stage that you are on stage. And I think it just, again, it helps with building a connection and a relationship with your clients. So there's never been like a direct benefit. Like it really is more of that peripheral, indirect. This is the kind of, like, people like us do business with people like you. It's back to like Seth Godin talks about all the time, right? Like people like us buy things like that, right? Like kind of building that brand. And I think you're able to endear yourself to clients and to potentially align values with brands and with clients through the nonprofit work. And again, it just shows a little more. People like to help people who are doing well and doing good in the world as well. So I do it all the time. I try to book performers. If somebody's like, oh yeah, you're booked, you recommend somebody, I'm like, I'm going to recommend one of the performers I know, like this guy John Rodolini has done. John Rodolini and Taylor Mason, these two performers, one's a comedy magician, one's a comedy ventriloquist. They've both done over 100 shows for Win-Win in the past during COVID. And, both Taylor and John said like Win-Win really helped them get through quarantine because, I could still do my thing. Almost every day they were performing for children's hospitals with their home studio set up, and they were able to engage with people. And as performers, like, we need that, man. It's like a drug.
Yeah.
You need that. And so, of course, I'm going to recommend John or Taylor first because I'm like, they're great guys. Like they've done so much good. They've put so much good in the world. Like it's not really intentional on my part. It's just like I think of them top of mind. I'm like, I want to help this guy. Like this guy's great.
Yeah, totally. Well, dang, Jeff, this has been an awesome episode. I'm so glad we got to unpack this. This is a unique episode. We haven't had any subject matter on this yet. So thank you for sharing your experience and giving some people insight on how they can get started. Of course, though, everyone that's listening to this is an entertainer of sorts, speaker, so on, MC perhaps. So if they're interested in potentially working with Win-Win, like what's the best way for them to learn more?
Yeah, for sure. We're online at winwinentertainment.org. On social media at Win-Win Charity. And I would encourage anybody to get involved. We have a lot of speakers who they'll host games, board games, right? Or there'll be a speaker predominantly in one area, but they have, another talent. Like let's say they do some magic or something, right? They don't really do much anymore. So it gives them a chance to like have some fun or musical, of a musical acts will put together some fun songs or do like sing along or things like that. So yeah, entertainers, of course, but also speakers have gotten involved with Win-Win, which has been great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes. So, hey, if you're interested in joining, definitely go check that out. And, hey, if you like this episode, don't forget to rate it, like it, subscribe to it. If you want more awesome resources like this, go to speakerflow.com/resources. Thank you so much for chiming in. I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsor, Auxbus. Auxbus is the all-in-one suite of tools you need to run your podcast. And it's actually what we run here at Speakerflow for Technically Speaking. It makes planning podcasts simple. It makes recording podcasts simple. It even makes publishing podcasts to the masses simple. And quite honestly, Technically Speaking wouldn't be up as soon as it is without Auxbus. Thank you so much, Auxbus. And if you are interested in checking Auxbus out, whether you're starting a podcast or you have one currently, get our special offer, auxbus.com/speakerflow, or click the link below in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in today. Check the show notes for more info and see you next time. Later.